Hey there, what's happening, everybody? Thank you for tuning into Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan writer for The Freak, joined by Reiner Sabin, our Big Ten insider. Reiner, it brings me great joy to say this as we record at right about noon on Sunday, September 17th. It is Big Ten season. Are you ready?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it is a relief to kind of get past this stretch of non-conference games that really don't bring much excitement from a fan standpoint or even from a reporter standpoint, just based on the quality of the competition.
Have you ever been this excited to see Rutgers?
I mean, Rutgers actually looks pretty good.
I know.
They pretty much destroyed Virginia Tech on Saturday, so they might pose a challenge. I mean, they've kind of given Michigan some fits ever since Gianna's been there, so I think that it's actually could be an interesting game.
Yeah, they have certainly at different times. Last year's 52-17 in Piscataway wasn't too troubling, but we're actually going to get to that as we take a look at the Big Ten East in our B block of this show. But first things first, we're going to do this in two segments. First is our three thoughts, all about Bowling Green. Michigan beat Bowling Green 31-6. But wow, if ever there were a 25-point win that did not feel like one, I think it would be last night. JJ McCarthy certainly struggled. His roughest game as a Michigan Wolverine. We'll start with that. We'll get into our thoughts about the run game, and then the defense that carried the day again against a bad quarterback. Yet again, what are our thoughts about how they have really shined through 3 weeks? And then, as we said on the other side of the break, Big Ten power rankings. Is Michigan number one for both of us? We will see. And they would have been certainly heading into this week, but Reiner, that 31-6 performance certainly left some question marks, at least for me. Let's start with the glaring one, JJ McCarthy, 3 interceptions.
Yeah, it was a surprising performance by him. Disappointing too, obviously. I mean, he was erratic all game long, making questionable decisions, some bad throws that just, missed the mark altogether. And then, obviously he faced a little bit more pressure that he had to kind of contend with too. So, I mean, overall, it was a kind of a disconcerting outing, but also one that, they didn't really suffer many consequences, obviously, because of the opponent they were facing.
Right, but just because there are no consequences, I don't think that means there are no consequences, right? Like, I guess right. in terms of your psyche, like just because there's no L doesn't mean right. that there's not a setback and maybe some different concerns. I want to take a look, or at least break down a little bit, sort of the interceptions as much as we can. Without really having gone back into the all 22, at least I have not. The first one seemed to be, and Tron Moore said as much, was what he called a spacing issue. I think they don't really like to call out individuals. It looked like, I believe it was AJ Barner on the far side was sort of was not spaced out wide enough, and his route brought a corner into the waiting zone where Roman Wilson would have been streaking across. And so it's hard to know whether to blame that on JJ. Certainly the second one, where it's a post pattern to Cornelius Johnson deep down the middle of the field. And I mean, the safety just easily undercut it. There was never really a window there to begin with, although JJ McCarthy has thrown balls into places where there appear to not be windows. So that's kind of that catch-22 when you're as talented as he. And then I think the third pick, perhaps the most concerning, or maybe the least concerning, that seems like a weird sentence depending on how you say it. It is the most concerning because it was just so careless. When you're scrambling, rolling left, and there is obviously no one open. He said he tried to throw the ball away into the stands. how someone as accurate as JJ McCarthy tries to throw the ball out of bounds and leaves it inbounds is very hard for me to believe. He said he's done it the same in practice, and he will never again leave a ball too close. He will throw it into the 300 level if he needs. So it's not concerning because it's avoidable. But man, when it is concerning because JJ has said, and through those first 2 weeks, it looked like he had gotten that careless pass out of his game that we saw rise a couple times late in the season last year versus TCU. Yesterday, I think careless would be an appropriate word.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, the throw downfield to Cornelius Johnson, I also think he kind of somewhat gave up on the route a little bit. But I mean, it was a bad decision because I mean, I think Roman Wilson was pretty much wide open on that play, that very same play. And then you had also, again, you alluded to the Colston Loveland throw. I don't know. There really wasn't much to gain from that pass to begin with. I mean, probably, throwing away and cutting your losses, I mean, is obviously the better way to do that. It was just not a great decision. And then also, the throw in the end zone again. I mean, I think that there's a lot of truth to the fact that, again, Barner probably brought a defender into that, window, which ended up messing up the play altogether. So, again, there's fault to go around, but it mainly lies at JJ's feet. And, that's what you get when you're in the Michigan quarterback. I mean, it's a tough position. I mean, very scrutinized, and, as much as praise as he got in the first 2 weeks, he's going to get a lot of criticism for this performance this past Saturday.
And his line could have been even rougher, Reiner. That 50-yard pass to Cornelius Johnson that resulted as a third of his passing yards and one of his 2 touchdowns was batted first by the defensive back. JJ did say he knew. He said he knew that the defender had a club on one of his hands, and so he trusted Cornelius to make a 50-50 play. Still, it was still a questionable pass and a tough way to get what was their best offensive play of the night. That was not the Blake Corum run. So as we do, we will transition to the running game. Blake Corum, 12 rushes, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns. It all started with a 54-yard run on the first play of the game, at least for Michigan's offense. And that whole drive, 4 plays, 77 yards, really effortless. It looked like it might be one of those types of nights early to start Reiner, that Michigan might just steamroll. But after those first 4 runs for 77 yards, Michigan 27 runs, 92 yards the rest of the way. What did you make of their rushing effort?
I mean, it wasn't all that different from the first 2 weeks. I mean, it was, they've become kind of a feast and famine type rushing attack, which, again, Jim Harbaugh talked about last week, the idea that they're, not getting enough efficient runs, and, they're getting stopped, for 0 to 3 yards, and just, not consistently moving the chains. I mean, you get these chunk plays occasionally that they've had with, Blake Corum usually being the one who does that. And then, they get stopped for, 2 yards, 1 yard, no gain, maybe even a lost yardage. And so it's a concerning, thing. I'm honestly surprised that, they haven't been able to establish the run better than they have against these types of teams. And it does raise questions going into Big Ten play when, especially against, now that they're facing Rutgers right out of the gate in Big Ten. I mean, everybody said, oh, it's Rutgers. Well, I mean, they usually have a pretty good linebacking core, and, Shiana's got a pretty good defense. I mean, you alluded to the fact that the game last year, was 52-17 or whatever. But I mean, that game was nip and tuck in the first half. And, again, the year before, which was a, Big Ten title team, went to the college football playoff, they were sweating bullets in the fourth quarter. It was a 20-13 win, and obviously in 2020, they were dragged into 3 overtimes And, who knows what would have happened if they lost that game. I mean, Jim Harbaugh might not even be the coach. So, I mean, that Rutgers team is giving them fits, at times. And their defense is usually pretty solid, especially in kind of the front seven. I mean, I usually, eventually, Michigan breaks them down, but it's not always that easy,
That's how Michigan did it last year. Good point. Eventually, that run game just sort of wore down, as Michigan did to everybody, literally everybody, until TCU last season. It was their recipe. And also Michael Barrett, 2 interceptions, returned 1 for a touchdown. That really flipped the tide early in that fourth quarter. But you're right, Reiner. I mean, we say usually Rutgers defense is pretty good. This might be the best of the bunch. Right now, Rutgers run defense through 3 weeks ranked 11th in the nation, giving up fewer than 70 rushing yards per game. I was just going through this earlier today for the story that will be up on free.com by the time this publishes about what is Michigan football through 3 weeks of the season. There are 3 opponents. East Carolina is the number 100 run defense. UNLV is number 86, and Bowling Green is 101. So these are bottom tier run defenses. And that's even weighing into the fact that one of the 3 opponents those teams have faced is Michigan, right? So numbers could be even more heavily weighted against them at this point in time. And Michigan facing nearly a top 10 run defense this upcoming week, it is concern. There's reason to be concerned going into the game that Michigan might struggle on offense again. And I wanted to talk a little bit about each of the backs individually. I was talking with a couple other writers post game yesterday who said they still felt like Blake Corum did not look like Blake Corum. I actually disagree with that. Yesterday, I thought
he was the best. Yeah, that was his best performance. I thought.
I know. It was questionable.
Yeah.
I mean, he was falling forward. He was shifty. He was patient. You saw the wiggle. I mean, and Michigan has been taking it easy with him, working him back. He has 42 touches through 3 weeks. It's 14 a game. I mean, there were halves where he would run the ball 20 to 25 times, a half last year. So they're being very conscious with what they're doing with him, and his production, 6.9 yards per carry, is as productive. I mean, he averaged just under 6 per carry last year. So I'm not concerned about Blake Corum. And yesterday, Donovan Edwards, 9 rushes, 4 of them were those quote non-productive runs that Jim Harbaugh does not like, for 3 yards or fewer. However, he was better yesterday, a little bit than in some of the other ways. 9 rushes, as I said, 50 yards. But he had a run of 11, a run of 8, a run of 10, a run of 6, a run of 5. So that's not nothing. And what I liked as I look on Pro Football Focus, sort of the run direction breakdown, he had 1 run sort of off the left edge for 11. His left guard run only went for run. His run to the middle left, between the center and the left guard, went for 8. And I'm not going to break each one down, but then 6, and then they had to run, and then 5, and then 10. So it was not like he only had success running one style behind one side of the line. There was a little more opening on each side. And I made a note in particular on Michigan's second drive. It was their 3rd snap of the game, when they had the Lightning personnel on the field, Corum and Edwards. I think it was the play they sent Corum in motion, which sort of got linebacker shifting one way. They handed it to Edwards up the middle. He paused, waited for a hole to clear, and then shot through it for a gain of 8. It was just 8 yards, but that was, for me, maybe my favorite Donovan Edwards run of the year. Now, that's certainly an indictment of where he is, but I thought he was a little better yesterday.
I'd agree with that. I mean, it looked like he was more committed to hitting the hole and then driving forward as quickly. I mean, as possible, as opposed to in the first couple of weeks where he looked rather tentative and unsure of where the hole was opening up, and didn't seem as committed to whatever hole he was going to go run through. So I thought he looked better in this game. I do think that there's obviously some issues with the offensive line. I mean, the fact that they, rotated out, Miles Hinton for, and then seemed to move Carson Barnhart over to the right side, and then have Ladarius Henderson in the left tackle. I know that they were talking about the Michigan method, but then to have this happen in the third conference game, midway through, it seems a little bit strange. And it sounds like, maybe they've shifted their thinking midstream about how they were going to handle this and hoping it was going to be one way and maybe now having to consider another alternative. I don't know what you thought about that, but I thought it was a little bit alarming.
Yeah, Reiner, I did think it was somewhat alarming. But really what struck me as much as anything was the way Michigan chose to handle it. Not just replacing Trente Jones on the right side for Miles Hinton, but sort of a double shift, right? Bringing Carson Barnhart across to the right side and then Ladarius Henderson in at left tackle. Yes, Barnhart did have a good amount of experience on the right side last year, but if it's close, I mean, far be it from me to be an offensive line coach, but here's how I would imagine: the less shifting, the better. And so I would have guessed it would have gone. They would have gone with Trente Jones, especially since they had been bringing him in on a lot of their packages when they have an extra lineman on the field. It is probably time. I was just about to ask you if you think it's time to be officially concerned with the offensive line. And I don't think it's concerned that it's not still an elite offensive line, but right now is one of my bold predictions for the season. I said I thought Michigan was going to win a third Joe Moore Award in a row. Right now, they are not playing like that.
No, I don't think they are. And, I do think that there's some weaknesses there. I think they're better at pass protection right now than they are at run blocking, which, again, may shift their approach as an offense, where they may lean more on the pass because they have to, not necessarily because they want to. And that's the question. I mean, can they do this and run the offense in a different way and be as effective as they were the last couple of years, especially through the Big Ten schedule? That's the $1 million question. And, I think, basically, from what I've seen so far, the offensive line is just not, consistent enough where they're winning at the point of attack from a down-to-down basis. And, Michigan did that all the time, it seemed, the last couple of years, where, there was really never a question about whether they were going to control the line of scrimmage. Now there is. And so, going into Big Ten play, I would say that would be concerning, especially considering the identity of this team has been its ground attack the last couple of years, and really is about its physicality. I mean, they just want to outmuscle you. And that's kind of that's also the Michigan method. And so to not see them be able to do that against some kind of, group of five teams that are really, who knows what their outlook is this season, but I mean, they're certainly not going to be, top tier teams. It's worrisome, I would say.
Yeah, they might not even be bowl teams. But where there has not been any worries thus far is on the other side of the ball for Michigan with the defense. Now, they can only play who's in front of them. There has not been a true quarterback to test them to this point. However, Michigan has given up, the first team defense has given up 3 points all season. Yes, it allowed 6 yesterday, but I don't count allowing 3 points when your offense turns the ball over on your side of the field, you force a 3 and out, and then they make a field goal. That you were not responsible for that. Michigan did everything they could, the defense, short of forcing a turnover there. So last week, we were very impressed with the interior of the defensive line, specifically Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Chris Jenkins was not as productive last week. He got in on the action this week. But I also want to mention Jalen Harrell, who is having just a heck of a start to the season. He had a 3-play stretch in week 2 where he had a sack, then did not have a sack, and then had a sack. And now that is no longer even his best 3-play stretch of the season, because on the first defensive play of the second half against Bowling Green, he forced the pressure on the Falcons' third-string quarterback, who then forced a screen pass that Chris Jenkins was able to intercept. And then on the next series, on the second play, Jalen Harrell came away with the strip sack, and Michael Barrett was able to fall on it. So wanted to make sure we started with him. What else stood out to you on that side of the ball, Renner?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, Sanders-Still is, again, proving himself to be, kind of an elite defender. I mean, he's one of the players I kind of immediately gravitate, my eyes at least, kind of seem to focus in on anytime he's on the field. I don't know what it is about that. It just, it seems like he's always around the ball, and that's always a good sign. I feel like the defensive line, I mean, again, Chris Jenkins looked like he, was more active, and certainly had the interception, which was, again, a clever play on his part. He kind of, read the eyes of the quarterback and was able to kind of come up with the big play in that situation, which was actually a pretty pivotal play considering, where they were in the game at the time that he made it. And so it kind of allayed any concerns that, Bowling Green was going to actually do something to threaten Michigan in that game. And so you have to, again, the defense has been solid ever since they've implemented this scheme, this kind of multiple scheme from the Baltimore Ravens. And they seem to particularly be able to shut down inferior teams for sure. And that's, that's evident. And then also, I mean, again, because of their versatility from a defensive standpoint, they really can match up with some of these spread teams too.
Yeah. And I don't know if that side of the ball will be all that more tested against Rutgers, which is better on offense this season, but not a true, power by any means offensively. However, while we want to give tons of credit to Michigan, and they deserve credit, Bowling Green's quarterback spent all week. I heard one staffer telling a Michigan, one of Michigan's spokesmen that their third string quarterback spent all week as JJ McCarthy running the scout team. Right, he had not taken a snap. Now there is something to be said for Michigan having game plan for Connor Bazelak all week long, and then only to find out an hour before game time, it's actually Camden Orth who's going in. And I think that's why Michigan's defense had a little bit of trouble with Orth early on. He was 8 of 11, 91 yards. If there was anything to be concerned with, there was a 3rd and 10 conversion. There was a 3rd and 15 conversion. Josh Wallace was also beat very badly on one double move.
Yeah,
Bowling Green's best receiver, Adu had a wide open touchdown, literally bounce off his hands in the end zone. But I mean, that can happen to any team on any drive. And for there to just be one true drive, and that was the drive that the defense gave up the 3 points, as we mentioned. So outside of that drive, Michigan has not allowed a team to cross half field and even attempt a look at points. Their first defense hasn't. So I was very impressed. And
they weren't starting their top, again, DBs. I mean, Quentin Johnson was playing, and
very good.
It's just like, again, their secondary is not at full strength. So, I mean,
Rod Moore has not yet played. Will Johnson has played 8 snaps.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. And so, I mean, it's not your, the true starting defense that you're seeing yet. So, in light of that, but I think your point is very valid. Obviously, they're playing against a walk-on quarterback who, again, was playing scout team the entire week, really didn't understand probably Bowling Green's own protections, and, totally the entire playbook. I mean, he was just kind of, I think they were doing some stuff on the fly. I think Scott Loeffler had to make some real in-game adjustments just to guide his quarterback through. I mean, this was not the plan to go into Michigan to play him at all.
Yeah. Yeah, Reiner, I think those in-game adjustments were just sort of mailing it in and accepting that this one was over, because they had a number of players who were carted off. And if you recall, the third string quarterback's final throw of the first half was intercepted. Then the throw to begin the second half was intercepted. It was clear the offense was not going anywhere. And Sharon Moore said as much after the game. He said they were content to just sort of hand it off, run it, and get out of there as healthy as everyone could. So I think there was some of that as well. Had that not happened, Michigan might have faced a little more trouble. But we're going to take a quick break. We were due to wrap that up anyway. We're going to look at the Big Ten power rankings on the other side. This is Hail Yes. All right, welcome back, Reiner. I think things have settled down on the other side of this door. First, the internet went out, then the dog. We're keeping this thing rolling because it's no longer non-conference season. We're supposed to be in Big Ten form. So power on, we shall. I think it's time to power rank the Big Ten, Reiner, now that the conference slate is going to begin. We're going to work our way from the bottom up. We will not spend our time as much on the bottom, and I should say the conference. It is really just the division, the Big Ten East, because the Big Ten West is trash and irrelevant. So, Reiner, I'm going to start with you. Who do you have in your 7th spot?
I've got Indiana right now. Again, they're a weak team. They've fallen off since that 2020 kind of surge, which was led by Michael Penix Jr., who just destroyed Michigan State and East Lansing. We'll go back out to Seattle and probably destroy the rest of the Pac-12 as well. So, he made Indiana a couple of years ago, and so they just have not been the same since.
No, he is serious business. I also have Indiana at 7, but this was a coin flip, Reiner. I almost put the team who they beat for their last Big Ten win at 7. But I think a lot of teams can't handle Washington right now, especially given the week Michigan State just went through. That is part of a power ranking. It is why they are certainly trending down. Things look like they're falling apart in East Lansing. Which is why I'll just go to, that's who I have 6. Indiana, I did keep it 7. Michigan State 6. Things went from rough to even rougher in East Lansing this week. A really bad week with the departure of Mel Tucker, the suspension of Mel Tucker, and then to lose. I think the final was 41-7, fall behind 41-0. Michigan State will have nightmares about Michael Penix just for years and years. I don't know if I've ever seen one person just torture another defense like this for so many years for different teams. MSU has to get it together very quickly.
Yeah, it was a dreadful performance. They gave up 713 yards. The offense was comatose for pretty much for 3 quarters when Noah Kim was in the game, their starter. It was rough all the way around. They didn't look like they belonged on the same field as Washington. It wasn't even competitive in the least. And, it just is amazing how far that program has fallen since this time last year. As I've written about, they entered the Washington game last year as the number 9 team in the coaches poll. It's just amazing how far, things have just unraveled, or the degree to which they've unraveled. And, the Mel Tucker suspension, just raises questions about the future. The one thing I will say for MSU is that, it's a program, strong program, well-financed program in the Big Ten, which is one of the 2 major conferences now. They'll probably get some attractive candidates. And with the way the transfer portal is, you can rebuild a roster pretty quickly nowadays. And so I think, for people writing them off, long term, I don't think that you can necessarily do that. So right now they're number 5, 6 in the Big Ten East, but who knows what we'll see in a year. I mean, maybe 2 years, they may very well be back up in the, top 3 or 4 teams on that side. Of course, there's not going to be divisions, but at least they might be in that 4, 5, 6 range in the Big Ten in general.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Reiner. There won't be a Big Ten East, but things can cycle. Who do you have at 5?
5.
This is where I had to start splitting.
Yeah, I've got Rutgers right now, just because I don't know about their upside. I don't see them as great as Maryland necessarily, but I think they're very solid, and I agree that that's probably a coin flip between the two right now. I think Maryland's more intriguing just because of the quarterback they have, and so I think they have more potential to shock a team, maybe in that, whether it's Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, let's say maybe Rutgers. So that's why I have Maryland up there, and I think Mike Locksley has done a much better job recruiting, and he's brought in a lot of talent there over the years to make them pretty competitive. I think Schiano has too, but I think Maryland's getting a little bit higher class of player too.
Yeah, and I could have gone that way as well, but I had the opportunity to put Rutgers at 4 in a Big Ten East power ranking. You think I am passing that up? Not a chance. Not a chance. So Maryland is my 5. I mean, frankly, yes, they beat Virginia by 4 touchdowns again yesterday, but Virginia's 0-3. Virginia is terrible. Charlotte, who they beat in week 2, is not great either. I think they have a losing record. They're 1-2, and I'm not sure if Towson. I did not check if they did win yesterday over Morgan State, so they are now 1-2. But I mean, they beat nobody. We see this from Maryland a lot. All the time, in fact, the solid non-conference, the quarterback who's back for the 95th year, the big receivers on the outside, they can punch up and then they don't. I mean, Mike Locksley was very confident in it when we spoke with him in Indianapolis in July. He said, "We are talking about Big Ten championships," which is a sentence you've never heard me say here before. But it's splitting hairs right now, but I'm just going to put Maryland at 5 because I can. Which brings me to 4. Rutgers, I mean, they look seriously good on defense. Virginia Tech is also not a great team. They lost to Purdue, so they should need to pay some sort of compensation to the Big Ten for getting manhandled. But I think number 11 ranked rush defense in the country. They scored 35 points against the Power 5 conference team. Rutgers never does that. So they have things going. Greg Schiano does right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done a good job, obviously, there. I mean, as much as he can at Rutgers. I mean, again, considering where they were before he got there, I mean, it's been marked improvement in the program, and they are competitive. Again, they've challenged Michigan at times over the last couple of years, and it's not a cakewalk for Michigan when they go in and play Rutgers, and MSU's had challenges with Rutgers as well. I mean, like they're not a pushover program anymore, and so you can definitely make a case for them being the 4th team, whether that's them or Maryland.
Yeah, but the reason they still are not going to be able to punch all the way up with Michigan next week, as tempting as or as close as they may be able to make it with the defense. I mean, they just can't move the ball through the air. Gavin Wimsatt against Virginia Tech yesterday, 7 of 16 for 46 yards.
Yep.
What are we doing here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's again, the quarterback plays the big differentiating factor in a lot of teams' trajectories, and how far they can go.
Who you got at 3 of the big 3?
I've got Ohio State right now. They just, the win over Western Kentucky, was impressive. 63-10, but they've looked kind of shaky in the first couple weeks, and the offensive line hasn't been that strong, and there still seems to be some question marks about the quarterback, McCord, and how well he's going to progress over the course of the year. Can he get humming and going by the time they play Penn State, which is their first big test. They play Notre Dame, but as far as relating to the Big Ten, that's a question. So right now I just think that they're not maybe vintage Ohio State yet, and that's going to be largely determined by how they perform over the next month or so.
Yeah, the game at at Notre Dame is this weekend. So we're gonna find out soon. But I think Ohio State has to be certainly. I had the Buckeyes at 3 as well. But really, it's more because of where number 1 and 2 are than number 3. Kyle McCord, 19 of 23 yesterday, 318 yards, 3 touchdowns. You loved it after how much Ohio State struggled against Indiana in week 1 offensively, even if it is Western Kentucky, right? You like to see clean, no problems. Travion Henderson back looking healthy, Marvin Harrison Jr. We know the players, we know the guys, we know the people. It's just sort of seasoning and proving it is where Ohio State is, I think for both of us. So I will go with my number 2. And I waffled. I wanted to put Michigan, but I have no backbone, so I'm not going to. No, the real reason that I'm not going to is Michigan and Penn State are pretty much a coin flip still at this point. Both have elite defenses right now. Penn State's offense has been firing better than Michigan, but Michigan is just more proven than Penn State. So I will keep Penn State at number 2. Just because Penn State has not they beat West Virginia, but they have not done anything that's so wowing, so impressive. They don't. There just hasn't been enough body of work for me to flip them over Michigan. Are you there as well?
Yeah, I agree. I think again the strength of Penn State is their defense, and the defense has been solid. But the question is they really haven't played anybody yet that you can say is maybe West Virginia
and they just beat Illinois on the road yesterday,
and they beat Illinois, but I don't think Illinois is any kind of great offense by any means, and so they look pretty limited from in the passing game for sure, and so the question is whether they can again do that against a team like Michigan. Remember, Michigan did just run over them. That game was supposed to be pretty tightly. It was supposed to be a tight, competitive game last year, and it just didn't end up that way at all. So right now, I'm leaning towards Michigan again just because of their recent past over Penn State, but I guess early on they've looked pretty solid though too, and so you can make an argument that Penn State should be the number 1 team ahead of Michigan, but I'm gonna stick with Michigan as well as the number 1 team.
Yeah, but the good news is that I would say we'll soon find out, but Penn State's schedule is not all that much more challenging than Michigan's outside of when the big 3 meet one another, right? Penn State welcomes Iowa to town this week. Iowa, I think if we were power ranking the Big Ten West, would probably be on top, but that's just by default. They did not look good yesterday against Western Michigan. Yes, they won by 41-10, but I don't know if anyone was super impressed. Then Penn State plays Northwestern, has a bye. They host UMass, and then they go to Ohio State. So how about that? A bye and then UMass. So really 2 byes before Ohio State. So Penn State will have 3 weeks to prepare for Ohio State. Does Penn State even turn on UMass film?
I don't know. I mean, UMass is actually better this year. I mean, they brought in a bunch of transfers, and you're kind of discrediting Don Brown. I mean, he's trying to get that program off the mat, and again,
you're right. They did actually have a decent showing at Eastern this weekend. They almost won in the fourth, but I mean, like, what I'm saying, Auburn beat them 59-14, right? What I'm saying is you don't. And Penn State's better than Auburn. You don't need to, in the middle of the season, if it's week 1, week 2, you're still a little rusty. Like, of course, you show some respect. But like, there is nothing UMass should be able to do that Penn State can't just do shell defenses and base offenses and win by a couple scores.
Sure. And that's the beauty of those games. I mean, you kind of, take it easy for a week, win a game, and maybe prepare for the bigger opponent down the line. Michigan State had that opportunity week 2, but I don't know if they took advantage of it.
They are at different places. Penn State and Michigan State are right now. All right, so that'll do it for week 3. That'll do it for the non-conference slate. The next time you hear from us, it will be Thursday. We will preview Michigan's Big Ten opener against undefeated Rutgers. That game is at noon on Saturday. But first, many thanks to give out. We need to thank our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols, our executive editor, Anjanette Delgado, sports editor, Kirkland Crawford, audio engineer, Robin Chan, sports editor, and our producer, Andrew Burkle. Thank you, Reiner. Thank you to the listeners. I'm going to say it each time, still at 5 stars, Reiner. And so please, let's keep that going. And how about even more reviews where we're getting in, they're starting to climb. I want to get to 100 5-star reviews. I don't think that should be too difficult sometime this football season. So thanks once again to everybody. And Reiner, enjoy your football Sunday.
Thank you. Should be fun. Watch the Lions.
Are they going to win? I mean, how about this? Did they just win? Did the Lions just win? Now that we're listening on Monday.
I'm going with yes. How about you?
Absolutely. And I benched Geno Smith on my fantasy team because Ford Field is going to be a snake pit. All right. That'll do it. Thanks, Reiner. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.